as well. Okay.
So my purpose of having you here today is to teach you about the causes of climate change, the things that contribute to it. There's numerous things that do contribute to it, but I'm only going to be covering 5 of them. And I'm sure you've noticed that over the years that you've all been alive, that weather patterns are changing. It's getting hotter in the summers, it's getting colder in the winters. There's reasons for that, and my job is to teach you about those, and hopefully down the road maybe you'll realize that this is true and you can figure out, what can I do, what is my part in solving that. So the very first thing that I want you to do is look outside. There's numerous cars out there because we're in a subdivision, people are home, it's a Saturday. Each one of those cars, with each gallon of gas that they consume, they're putting out approximately 24 pounds of greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere. That doesn't come specifically just from them burning the fuel, that comes from harvesting the fuel, us consuming it, it being transferred to the stations where we fill up. Any part of, as soon as that oil leaves the ground and gets burned by your car, it's contributing to the emissions that are put into the atmosphere. So just 24 pounds for every gallon of fuel that we consume. I drive a ridiculous amount for my job, and I go through gas like a madman. So I'm driving, I don't know, let's say 100 miles a day. I'm putting a lot more fuel or emissions into the atmosphere than most people are. So I'm definitely guilty of contributing to this, as well as everybody else who's driving every day. There's solutions that are out there, like carpooling, ride sharing, things like that, that we can do to combat this. Like I said, oil drilling is another thing that contributes to this. Not only is it because it's putting carbon emissions into the atmosphere, just the act of drilling it releases methane, which is another gas that contributes to climate change, because what it does is it rises into the air, up into the high atmosphere, and it sits there collecting heat, and without burning off or doing anything, it sits there and just causes the temperature in the atmosphere to rise at levels that we've never seen before, because up until the Industrial Revolution, we weren't burning fuel the way that we are now. Another thing that contributes to it, and according to climateandweather.net, deforestation is it is actually the largest contributor of climate change, because we're cutting down trees at a rate faster than we can replant them and allow them to grow. We're doing this for all of our paper products, anything that you can think a tree be used for. We're cutting it down at a rate that we never have before, and we can't plant them fast enough to allow ourselves enough time to treat the atmosphere as well. So the Amazon rainforest is actually a perfect example of this, because I don't know if you've seen in recent news, but the Amazon rainforest is actually on fire, and they say that they were set intentionally. It doesn't really matter. But the Amazon rainforest is considered the lungs of the world because it's so vast and so massive and dense that it actually holds so much of our carbon emissions. And with us cutting down the trees that are in there, it's also, one, we're creating carbon emissions for cutting down the trees, and whatever carbon that tree is holding, as soon as we cut it down, that gas that it's holding is released into the atmosphere, causing even more problems. Forests will actually store 100 times more carbon emissions than like a field of crops the exact same size. So just think about that for a minute. We can store 100 times more carbon in a forest that's, let's say, 1 acre than we can a field of crops that's just 1 acre. So all that gas that's being released into the atmosphere is just causing additional damage, and those crops aren't doing anything to help it. And agriculture is actually another massive contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, because one, we're cutting down all of the forest, especially in the Amazon, to make room for livestock, planting additional crops, anything like that. And along with having that livestock in the area, they're actually creating methane emissions, which, again, same with oil drilling, goes into the atmosphere. It sits there, heats up, and we can't do anything with it, and it's just causing further problems for the atmosphere. The last thing I want to talk about is the production of energy. And according to climatechangechallenge.org, there's 3 main contributors to this. There's coal, there's natural gas, and there's actually skyscrapers. So in recent years, coal has actually begun to drop off, which is great because we're not putting those carbon emissions into the air. For natural gas, it's again just a gas that if it's not burned off and it is released, it just goes into the atmosphere and it sits there, heats up, and causes additional issues. And actually for skyscrapers, even though they're not producing any kind of energy, what they do is, because they're almost entirely glass, they're incredibly difficult to cool, and it's not very energy efficient, so it's just causing additional issues for we're wasting all of these energies on trying to cool off these massive buildings that are virtually impossible. So in closing, I just want to say that I really hope that this was something that can help you realize that we are causing issues, and even though it may be unintentional, it's nearing time that we have to do something because we're reaching a tipping point where if we don't take action now, it's going to be too late.